our mission is to help safely feed the world, and by enhancing food safety and preserving the food quality.
The food job that we're exploring today is project engineer. Our professional in this role is Mohammad Kathawala, senior project engineer at Agri-Neo, a food safety technology company. In this episode, you'll learn how Mohammad tackles engineering projects with clients.
I will help the customer understand what the technical needs would be, like utility connections, the site construction layout, what space do they need, what would their upstream and downstream equipment would look like.
The different engineering paths he's explored.
And that's where was my first dive into the professional field of equipment design and fabrication, which helped me get my first job as a design engineer.
And advice for aspiring engineers.
Learn about coding a bit so to help you understand and interact well with the other functions, because if you are able to speak the language that they speak, it will make you a successful project engineer.
Thank you to CareersNOW for sponsoring this podcast episode.
So Agri-Neo is a biotech firm and is an innovative technology leader. So what Agri-Neo does is we help with food safety and food safety challenges in the global supply chain. So our flagship product is NeoPure and is used to treat dry food ingredients such as seeds, nuts, and spices. So when I say is use, is like our customer use our technology to treat the food product. So that's where, we are manufacturer of the equipment and supplier of the solution that they would use to then treat the food ingredient that they are particularly dealing with. So, and our mission is to help safely feed the world, and by enhancing food safety and preserving the food quality. So, and we are on that organic side, so that's what makes our product, that much better in the market, considering the traditional methodologies that exist in the market at this day.
Very cool. Yeah, I got to see, I think your company was featured on, I think it was CTV News or it was Google. It was one of
That's correct.
Oh my gosh, not Google, Global, one of the major news. So it was really cool to see it's not just the food companies that are taking notice, but to be on the national news, that's pretty cool.
Yes, definitely. And that was also one of our focal points as well, to be present, considering, the size of our firm, but the impact that we are able to make with such a small team. And, we all are very highly motivated and talented individuals, and each one brings their special skill set to make that pie a complete pie.
Well, we're going to dive into that later because I want to learn more about the interworkings, but we got to start with you and learn a little bit more about your food job. So tell me more about your food job, Mohammed.
My food job is very interesting. In my current role, I play as a senior project engineer, playing the technical lead for my organization and helping bridge the gap between the commercial sale to the finish when the customer buys our equipment or buys our technology, as a matter of fact. So I lead capital projects. Well, currently the value of our equipment can be in millions of dollars, depending on what and how many different components or equipment our customer is buying. And when all said and done, what I help with is help the customer basically understand what did we buy and how do I integrate this technology into our facility, and how can that installation be seamless so that we are able to get going from day one. My role is, once the project gets signed up, I will help the customer understand what the technical needs would be, like utility connections, the site construction layout, what space do they need, what would their upstream and downstream equipment would look like, and how they would interact with our system, and if there would be any changes in their processes and what would those look like, and how the employees would interact with our system and what changes would be implemented. So it's a holistic approach, and we, as Agri-Neo, we provide that holistic solution to our customer, because we are just not in a business of selling equipments. We are also helping the customers install, set up, and run, and ensure that they keep running, because we have vested interest in them running. As they run and they use our technology, our name goes out there, and we are able to treat more and more quantity of product out there. So, our USP right now, I would say we started with nuts, then we started with nuts, seeds, and now we are entering into the spices industry as well. So we are doing quite a bit in onion, garlic, and other spices as well. And initially we started with North America, then went to South America, and now we have a presence in Egypt, we have a presence in India, we have presence in China. So, that the small team of ours and is making a global impact, and that's what excites me every day to think about it. Like, hey, yeah, the food that we are thinking is coming from China is already coming treated from a Canadian technology. Canadian company is supplying that food that is being treated in China, that is being treated in Egypt. And previously, before I even joined this org, I didn't know that our onions, treated onions that goes in our Heinz ketchup, the ketchup that we love and we grew up eating, is one of the main ingredients besides tomatoes. And a lot of it comes from China or Egypt or Spain or somewhere, right? So all these food products, when they come in, it doesn't come in raw form. It comes in dehydrated form so that you can transport more quantities. And there are these standards that FDA puts in, Health Canada puts in, that they need to meet. And that's where technology like ours comes into play to help these customers meet those industry regulatory standards.
Wow, that's very cool. I want to dive a little bit deeper because I feel like maybe for those that aren't as familiar, and I know you briefly spoke about it, but you've said equipment and you've said technology, and I feel I'm still needing a little bit more about I know what you're supporting with the end goal, but maybe just dive a little bit deeper. Is it just like someone goes into a catalog and then they order a piece of equipment and then that is what they purchase? Like what is a client getting when they work with you?
Yeah, for sure. So I can dive a bit. I was trying to keep it as high level as possible, but we supply. So our technology is called a NeoPure continuous process, and what that is a fluidized bed dryer, which has four sections, three heating, one cooling section, and where the product enters into our weigh belt, where the product gets measured, and then it enters into an applicator, which basically is considered like a front loading your washer. So there are spray nozzles inside there that would spray our proprietary solution on it, so then it will get dosed. Now, since we have added moisture to the product, we need to remove that moisture. So that's when it would enter into our vibratory fluid bed, diced bed dryer, where it goes into the first three heating sections where the moisture gets evaporated along with that solution that we added. And then it cools down in the fourth section and exits on the other end. So that's the equipment setup, what it looks like in a nutshell. And what I help the customer understand is, how are we going to install this at your facility? And basically, like I briefly spoke, that your conveyance, like what would it look like feeding from the other equipment, right? For example, let's take a nut processor, so who is cracking walnuts, for example. So they would be cracking it at a different facility, but they will have these really long conveyors that bring in into the processing facility, which would be a clean facility. And when I say clean facility, it would be a filtered air environment. They maintain positive air pressure inside there, and you have to wear your safety gear, basically your hair nets and everything, so make sure that there is nothing additional extra coming from the environment into that room. So when they are coming into that room, so then they would feed into our system. So at this time, the product is still considered as quote unquote untreated. And once it goes through our NeoPure system, when it comes out on the other end, is where it would be treated, and now it would be considered as ready to eat. So, it's safe for you and I to eat after that. And
Okay.
then there are certain conditions that it further processing that it would go through, like, they would sort it by size or shape or color, and then go into packaging. So that's how it would work.
Okay, that helps really cement what you're doing, and I can imagine being an engineer. It sounds like it's a really fun job to help problem solve with each of your clients, because I can imagine that like each manufacturing facility is not exactly the same, so there's always like a new way
Yeah.
of of working with each client.
Definitely. And, you know, like earlier, I mentioned that we are just not dealing with North American clients, right? We have clients all around the globe now. So also interacting with people from different cultures, and every country has a different way of dealing with things or working with things. So, for example, working in Egypt and China is completely different because they are very fast paced, and they want to move ahead at a very very high pace, and the project progress is like go go go, right? Like when you hit the ground, it's like and because also the labor is cheap, so then what happens is they are able to put more people on the ground to get things done faster. So a task that I would take, let's say, a week here, I can get it done in like 2 to 3 days there, right? And a lot has to also do with supply chain things, because, like, for example, in China, most of the things are in China, so we are able to procure them easily and quicker in China than we are able to do it here. So there are pros and cons. Obviously, language is one of the biggest barriers that I've come across, and other than that, culture-wise, it has been amazing exposure.
Wow, that's so amazing. And to think that, coming into this role, you probably weren't to learn that there's different cultural ways that people do about it in different ways. That's such an
Yeah,
interesting take that never really quite considered. So, yeah, thanks for sharing that. And then, coming back to you, you mentioned that it's a small team. And then, so
yeah.
kind of paint a picture of what even an organization like yours is like. So we have you who's working on the engineering side, helping to implement these
Yeah.
different machines and technologies, but like, how does your whole company work? Oh my gosh, that's a big question.
I know, but well, I am on the operations side because I would say I'm in engineering operations, where since when the technology is ready or ready to be commercialized, that's when operations and a person like myself would come in to help commercialize that technology. Basically, what that means is that now we are ready to hit the market. For example, like, a launch of a new product into the market. For an easy example would be like an iPhone launch, right? So it would be ready to launch. So then there's someone who takes over, and the R&D department now goes on to doing something else, because now they have finished that product development cycle. So that's where it would come in. And NeoPure is one of the technology that we have commercialized, and that's where now it is with us, where our commercial team is now finding customers that would best fit for use of our technology. So that's how it would work. And so our organization is split into R&D. So under R&D, there is engineering and we have sciences. And then we have operations where the head is the CEO who I report to. And then we have our commercial group, which is led by the president of the organization, who take care of all the sales and basically customer account management and things like that from the commercial standpoint of view. And the operations would take care of once the customer has bought into our technology, then they come into operations because we maintain the reliability and field engineering aspect as well. So I have a field engineer and a project engineer working with me where we help maintain the systems that are already in the field with our existing clients.
Okay. So you really have it where it's helping all scale, like every portion of the process from even before a client even meets up with you. So you have the
Yeah.
R&D side, and then you have helping the clients as it's happening. But then you also have that post, okay, so it's already been implemented in the facility. How can we help continue that relationship?
Exactly, because spare parts, maintaining the equipment, ensuring that the equipment is used in the desired manner, checking in on those OEE reports, and because our system also is automated on the reporting aspect, so we can help troubleshoot remotely and make sure that the system is working within all those critical parameters that we, like our sciences team and engineering team, have defined that these are the working envelope. This is our working envelope, and the system needs to be working under this to ensure that we are meeting those efficacy targets. And again, not all efficacy targets are the same. Customers may have different needs depending on the market and that they're targeting, or their own customers' requests.
Okay. Well, that kind of like slides me into my next question, because I did want to ask you
Yeah.
about, for someone, when it comes to like, how do you figure out what is like a successful project? Like, how do you manage, like, what is your goals? Is it just to help make sure that the clients are happy? Like, as an
Yeah.
engineer in this type of role, how do you, I guess my question is like, how do you measure success in your role?
Yeah, so I would say in my role, obviously, a successful implementation is just not installing the equipment in the traditional environment, right? Like it also would be that how the client interacts with our system and how effectively are they able to use our technology and continue using our technology. Is there growth that we are seeing with the client or not? And if we are not seeing the growth, and if they are not able to process more food products through our technology, then what is the bottleneck? So those are the feedbacks that I provide to my engineering and sciences team as well to help. And sometimes customers may come up with requests where there would be like, hey, can we make this a bit better? Can we get the color a bit lighter, and things like that? Or for example, hey, can your equipment also roast my nuts? So I'm like, yeah, that's something that we can do. And then it goes under that R&D cycle. So things like that also is something we facilitate. But majorly for me, when I say I was successful in a said project, I compare it with like a three-legged stool, where the first would be the food safety and the quality assurance, which would be the non-negotiables. And that's the industry that we are trying to make our mark in. And the reason why, as you must have seen in the recent times, there are so many food recalls,
Oh my
and
gosh, yes.
every food recall comes with a safety risk, and sometimes in cases there is a loss of life, which is a big no-no. And that's where, when you are in food industry, there's immense pressure from a personal front and from your professional front, that you keep that lens or in your front at all times, and everything that you have to do, you look from a food safety and a quality standard, so you do not compromise on that first leg. The second one, I would say, is the operational performance, like the overall equipment effectiveness, the OEE, which is a worldwide known standard of measuring the line efficiency. How effective are we able to process the product through this line, and what and those numbers basically tells the organization the bottlenecks into their money making field, right? Like where are the waste, and identifying waste, and what can we do to reduce that downtime and things like that, or the changeovers that you would do when you are changing from one product to another. How much is my downtime, and what would you do to reduce that downtime? So we help our customers understand that as well. And then the way we reduce that is we provide this extensive training to our customers, where we spend almost a month's worth of time where our field engineer is on site training the customer's employee on all aspects. Everything that we know about our system is being taught. We provide these documentation, easy to read manuals, one page setup sheets that are installed on the system, where they would be like, oh, before I even sit in my car, like, what all do I need to do? Put on my safety belt, like,
Yeah.
it's the same, as simple as that is what we try to do. It's like, okay, I need to make sure the system is doing this, the equipment has this, the air pressure is okay, the gas pressure is okay, and things like that. So we make it as simple as possible. So then if it's easy to read, if it's easy to implement, it becomes a habit. Right now, we use our seat belts because it's easy to put on and there is nothing. Or you put that annoyance where something goes beep, 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 and that's where it makes you think that, oh, there's something that I need to correct. And then these setup sheets would help make sure that the operator now who would operate this machine day in and out would be able to gauge whether the equipment is performing within its limits or not. Am I out of spec or not? And that helps them keep the equipment. And the last one, the last leg of the stool is what I would say is the project delivery and the partnership, which I briefly spoke about earlier. This is on the business impact, where the project installation and commissioning phase is with delivering those targets with minimal deviations from my project scope, budget, and schedule, which is very critical. And when you are dealing with construction projects, definitely in a different geography, they can go out of hand very quickly, considering every country, every city has different rules and regulations that you need to deal with. And to ensure that that our customers' business is successful, also we help establish these bi-weekly meetings where the field engineers are doing these check-ins with them, ensuring with the plant point of contact that, hey, are you have enough spares? Is the system working okay? Are there any concerns? Are there any questions? Do you need any additional training, any support, and things like that? That make sure that the client is happy, and if there are any bottlenecks in their operational processes, get resolved right and then until it becomes a big problem. You resolve it before it becomes even a question in someone's mind.
I love how, you're not just thinking about food, but you're also thinking about the people too, which I think is really interesting, that you're not only thinking about, okay, this food, is it prepared correctly? Is it safe? Is it doing what we want? But then it also sounds like you have this like people aspect that you also need to consider. How are the people interacting with the machinery? What would they do? Like you mentioned about the alarm. So that's a lot of things to work around.
No, and that's where in operations within our organization, that is our key aspect. So we have this continuous feedback process where we absorb all this information that the clients are feeding us, because At the end of the day, our clients or our customers are the ones that are using our machine day in and day out. Like, being there as an engineer, as a designer, yes, you know your machine, but the end user who uses it on a daily basis, it's not that he would know it better, I will say, but they would have that valuable feedback by using it on a daily basis. And then that feedback is so important. And we have this whole process where we do our design to feedback, where we sit with our engineering team and sciences team that, hey, this is the feedback that we are receiving from the field. How can we integrate it into our current process and make sure? So that's where that continuous improvement process comes in. And
Right, right.
my CEO Tawal has a big role to play on this, and that people aspect is something that he lives by. So that's something that I would say is ingrained in our functioning principles of our organization.
Love that. And like hearing you talk about all this, like I can really feel like your passion and love for the job. But I guess I want to ask more specifically, like what parts of the
Yeah.
job do you love the most?
I would say definitely the challenge that every customer brings in, because you would think that onion in North America would be the same as onion in
Yeah,
China,
for
onion
sure.
in India, but it's not the same because every onion is different. So what makes a difference is the sweetness of the onion, the water content of the onion, and the spiciness of the onion. So those behave differently when it's dehydrated. Some onions are lighter, so the density of the product is different, so then it would flow differently and things like that. So that would change the product flow characteristics and the flavor. So next time if you are in the market, like just look at it. Like if you look at a white onion, which we call the Spanish onion, which is very mild in flavor. But if you pick up a red onion, for example, the most purplish looking one, I don't know why we call it red, but if you pick one of those up and you cut it, you'll feel that instant pungent
Yeah, it's much
what do you call
harsher.
smell. Yes, and much harsher, but it is good for flavoring and it goes really well with your spices. So that's why it's you predominantly use in those Asian cuisines. So things again, food is also a bit of my personal passion. So I dive into that a bit here and there. So
Yeah, so coming back, it's just that like challenge that
yeah.
you get all these different factors that you wouldn't even consider once you get like into the depths of it. It's like, oh, my client's asking for this, and it's like you would think the one solution fits, but then you're like, oh no, I actually have to adjust it a bit more, and that like problem solving. Quick pause here. If you're enjoying Mohammed's perspective on what it's like working as an engineer in the food and beverage industry, then you'll next want to check out CareersNOW.ca. CareersNow connects job seekers with Ontario's food and beverage processors and offers free online resources to help explore career options and grow in the industry. One resource I wanted to highlight is their video, What Can You Do with an Engineering Degree? In this video, industry professionals share how engineers solve real problems in the food industry, from designing more efficient packaging and improving production lines to strengthening food safety systems. Head over to CareersNOW.ca to watch the video and start exploring your path in the food and beverage industry. You'll find more details linked in the episode's description. Now let's get back into the conversation with Mohammed. Do you say that is a skill or like a mindset that you've had to develop? I ask because I know that we can obviously tell that you have like this problem solving, and I know that's definitely a skill. But besides that, like, are there any other skills that you use a lot in your role that are important for you?
Oh, definitely. Does the other skills that I would say is people and cross-functional leadership, right? And I would go back to the aspect where when you are interacting with people who speak a different language than you, who speak who come from a different cultural background from you, and at the same time, now they are your customers. So that relationship changes quite drastically than someone being on your own team but from a different cultural background. So maintaining a fine balance there is something that is on a continuous development, and as something that I had to pick up on and learn and develop over my tenure with Agri-Neo as well. And the other piece is what I would say is getting more in depth into, like, I come from a heavy mechanical background, but getting more exposure into the PLC and the controls fundamentals, and how the controls interact with the mechanical components and the electrical components, and how we are able to paint a picture of what that process flow would look like, and if this thing doesn't go here, then what happens next, and what that program logic would look like. So these are the skills that I had to sharpen over my tenure in the organization.
I think it's so interesting to hear you talk about like communication or like working cross-functionally, because I feel when we think about
Yes.
engineers, I'm sorry, but I just think of like engineers like in their own like little world, you know, trying to solve the problem and not thinking as much that they're working with others. So it's interesting that when you come to the, maybe at least where you work, that there is that cross-communication that, you know, you have to work with clients. So very interesting here. That's a skill that you've had to develop and work on.
And the reason I would say more is when you get onto the project engineering aspect
Okay.
as a field, that's where you would develop, or there is this inert need to interact with all the other functions. And you know, like, I haven't spoken much about my past,
Yeah.
but I was in a design role. I used to play a design engineer role in for the first 6 years of my career, where I designed various equipments over time. So in that, you all I was interacting day in and out were engineers. So engineers talk like engineers, and there is a different way they interact with each other, because you understand that there is a common sense prevailing that everyone in this room is an engineer,
Right.
so they speak the same language. But now when you get onto the project side to help the operations person understand, the production manager understand, or your production supervisor, or your logistics supervisor, or your logistics manager to understand, they may or may not come from a technical background, but they might come from a business background, or they might come from a food science background. So to help them understand what technical aspects that you are trying to implement that would help them achieve their goal is something that you need to internalize, and basically come from their perspective of that, how would this project work with this function, and how would they interact with this project, and what change would they implement? Would it make their life easier? Would it make it difficult? If it's going to make it difficult, is it a short-term difficulty or a long-term difficulty? So those are the things that you have to think and make sure that if you want your stakeholders, because they are your stakeholders, and if you want your stakeholders to be happy, you have to engage with them in an effective manner to ensure that you're successful in your project.
Yeah, that could be tough for some people to get used to, but I guess it comes with the role
Yes.
and to be effective with it. But I have to go back because we haven't spoken about your past, and I know that you didn't come out of school and be like, I'm working in the food industry. Like you've had a very unique past, and I'd love to just talk a little bit about some of the key steps to how you ended up in the food industry. Because like you said, you come from a different world. So Mohammed, tell me a little bit about your career path.
Definitely. So, well, as a young child, I was always interested and fascinated by machines, and I was just always drawn to them, and specifically cars and automotive industry was something that I drooled over day in and day out, and I would read magazines like they were, you're my textbooks. I wish I would read my textbooks that well, but so there was always this thing that if I want to be anything, I want to be an engineer, and specifically a mechanical engineer, because I wanted to learn how machines work and how would they function and what makes them tick well and what makes them not tick that well. So I that's where I pursued my bachelor's in engineering, and during my bachelor's, that's where I came across this amazing opportunity to work with a local equipment manufacturer who had this need where he needed someone like myself, a fresh graduate, to go through his fabrication process and find issues with how he could increase uh, the effectiveness and the efficiency of manufacturing equipment. And that's where was my first dive into the professional field of equipment design and fabrication, and which helped me get my first job as a design engineer with GEA, which is one of the largest process engineering or process equipment manufacturer. It's a German group which has these different businesses where it deals with pharmaceutical, it deals with food, it deals with chemicals, and it deals with farm technologies. So I was dealing with dairy and chemical industry majorly, where I was designing spray dryers and fluidized bed dryers and bag filters and cyclone filters, specifically in the milk drying and chemical drying industries, where you would convert milk into milk powder, for example. And one after spending a couple of years in with that organization, I felt that I needed to level up my skill, and that's where I migrated to Canada from India to get my master's from Western University. And now I was a bit more focused on what I wanted to do. So I did materials engineering from Western to help understand what different materials are available out there, and why would you select the said material to interact and make a better design out of it. And so while I was learning at Western University, that's where I had a massive learning curve, because now I was in a completely different environment culturally and from an education standpoint of view as well. So it was a completely different exposure that I got into, which led me to my next design job, which was designing hatchery equipments for the poultry industry, which that's where I first started interacting with Fanuc robots, or which are these pick and place robots that would pick up these chicken hatch trays, move it from one place to another, and you would have seen them in some car automotive plants as well. So that was the first time I worked with them on an industrial scale. I had used them in my lab scale, but in an industrial environment, it was really cool to work with them. And post which is where I did my first career pivot, and which was my direct path into the food industry, where I started working with Lactalis Canada, which is a French Canadian dairy firm. And thanks to my manager at that point, Sam Morgan, who put his trust in me to play this pivotal role in the organization, because that project engineer role was first of a kind. The plant never had a project engineer. So I was the first project engineer for that facility, which was prevailing for over 150 years. So it was a very old facility, which had been ticking like a clock. And the major challenge with that facility is that small space, high output, and to keep it working day in and day out, equipment needed upgrading, and there was just so many old equipment. So I came across technology that I hadn't even read in my textbook. So that was a very interesting exposure. Like just to name one of the few things that I came across is a belt-driven positive displacement pump. I had never heard of it. I had just heard of, direct pump, a motor connected to a gearbox that is connected to a pump. But there was this pump and with a belt, and I was like, oh, okay, it's a simple technology, but
Yeah.
it works, and there was no need for replacement. So, but things like that, and that's where I got into. Now I was not only playing a role of a project engineer, but I was playing a role of a design engineer because I was also helping design certain small equipments that were needed into the facility, where I would find vendors, get these built out. And then there was these immense demand on improving the process because we had to increase the efficiency of our lines and get more output out of the same area. So how would you do that? So there's like, okay, faster processing, doing so much capital investment, and where the deficiencies are, identifying those deficient areas of deficiency, and how would you do that? So as a project engineer is by interacting with people on the shop floor, because the people who are working day in and out in that area would be the best to interact with to get that information from the grassroots level. And then that they would come up with that problem, and then my job was to find a solution to that problem. So, and then get the stakeholders to buy in and involve in those scope development process, and then go through the hierarchy to get that project approval. So it was a very dynamic, a challenging role that I played, and I would say uh, it shaped me as an engineer, because now, like I said earlier, the first 6 years I was interacting with mostly engineers and some people from the business background. But now I was interacting with people from all walks of life and people from different educational backgrounds or different fields as well. So there was a massive learning for me to understand. And at this point, the good factor was that my customers were my own
Yeah, the
team, right?
workers.
Or the people that I worked with. So if I screwed up, I had to see them day in and day out.
Instant
So
feedback.
instant feedback, right? Hey, you were supposed to make my life easy. Now you've made it more difficult. So, that continuous improvement was always there. So, and that's where after that role, that's where I moved on to my current role, where it allowed me to shift into now with Agri-Neo, which is on a completely food safety is our top priority as an organization, like I earlier spoke of. And that allowed me to shift into managing these established processes to implementing our technology, right? So with this, now I was merging my skills in operations and engineering, now with sciences to help our customers install our technology at their facilities. And how can we get a better food quality in a sustainable manner as a key focus, right? So this role, my current role, has taught me so much about food engineering, and it is also about the world-class operation methodologies and putting our customers first. And I have to give a shout out to my mentor Tawal, who, like I said, is my CEO as well. So to ingrain that in all aspects of our project, and to just make sure that we keep that on our forefront day in and day out.
Wow. Wow, that is so cool. I didn't even realize there were that many different types of roles that an engineer could do. And just seeing how you've had this career where you've been able to explore the different industries and see the different ways that you problem solve to incorporate, improving, like continually improving the different processes, but then using the past knowledge that you've gained to just better, keep moving forward. That is so Wow, that's pretty cool. I This whole world of engineering
Yeah,
is really new to me, which it's interesting as well with the food and beverage industry is that for a lot of
yeah,
people we know the food aspect, but you need that processing aspect. It's like when you're cooking at home, you can have like the right ingredients, but if you process them, you can
yeah.
burn them and do that. So imagining it on a bigger scale, you're a big part of the puzzle.
Yes, yes, bigger than I know, and at the same time, it is very important for us as a end user as well to know because uh, though I'm involved in the industry, I'm also the end user of all the products that, our technology would use. So if anything, I care about, like every human does, cares about their safety before anyone. So that has to be, and that's where I said, if you are working in food, pharma, and anything relating industries, that should be on your top focus. And if you are not seeing from that lens, you're not doing it right.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way of putting it because when you go and you work in a food processing industry like facility, you really come to the realization that the products that you're making are being eaten by other individuals and their family. And like the worst thing that could happen is someone getting sick or is but it really puts that responsibility onto you that like I'm feeding the nation, I'm feeding like people around the world,
Yes.
so you want to do the
Yeah.
job properly.
Yes, and being on the other end, right? Like we are installing this equipment, this technology into someone else's facility, so we don't have every all the control on
Right.
how they would use, and that's where you we have to make sure as the proprietor of the technology or the people who are pushing this technology in the market that we make sure that we leave no stone unturned and there are no side roads that someone can take and circumvent our technology. So those fail safe or safeguards need to be built in, and our engineering team and our sciences team has done a great job to ensuring that those things are not circumvented. And especially when you are entering into a global market scenario like Egypt, China, India, where the functioning or the food safety standards are very different than what we have here. As a matter of fact, even Europe has a different food safety standard than we have in Canada and US. So that's where it matters that understanding of the interaction and how to safeguard that technology is was a key focus for us before we even enter into any other
Right.
continent, is
Right.
what we say.
And also kind of thinking about that future thinking because you're thinking about clients and how you can best, help with their needs, but thinking about like your job as a whole or looking at, maybe the food safety, where do you see your field like evolving in the next decade? Like what is exciting you the most or how are you preparing for the next how are you preparing for as the field continues to evolve?
Definitely, that's a really good question, and I would say, being in this industry for a little over 12 years now, I would say that the food industry is traditionally a bit late to adopt to new technologies and jump on that bandwagon is just because the amount of risk that you would be undertaking by adopting this new technology in also at the same time the risk that you would be exposing yourself to. So the shift that I am seeing in the industry, and I can share a bit about from my previous experiences, is predictive safety, is new and emerging technology that comes in. So what it does is basically figures out a failure before it is visible to a common eye. So a defect that would be happening live that you or a normal human could not figure out, like camera systems, for example. So we would have these cameras that were installed at the end of line. So it's like visual recognition, where you would teach the AI what the image should look like, what
Yeah.
are the different formats, and then it would compare it, and if there is any defect in that, it would reject it.
Very cool.
So that would be similar to, let's say, for example, a bottle of eye drops. So if it's going down the line, if it sees that the cap is not sealed properly, so now the outside air can enter in and contaminate the solution, and that can be unsafe for a human to use. So a little cap that to you and I would look, it's perfectly fine, it's sealed, but the AI, the camera vision system
Very
would be
cool.
able to detect that it's not sitting the way it is supposed to when it's off by zero point 0.1 centimeter, and it would just reject that. So that is the technology that is still being implemented and is not that prevalent in the food industry, but I know with my little exposure into the pharma industry that it is already prevalent, and sooner or later it will come to. And the more reliance and robust sensors that are getting implemented into these processes, that would help maintain the integrity and the food safety standards that as a whole world that we are trying to move towards. Like food that we eat today is much safer than what it might be a controversial statement, but is safer than what it was 50 years ago or 100 years ago, because now we know better and we have learned
Yeah.
and we have developed over the years. And the other big thing is the data. So there is big data to predict contamination before it even occurs. And based on the historical information that you feed into the system, the AI is able to look at the historical data, look at the current live data, and predict a failure that may happen and dish out an error where now a human has to intervene and make a decision whether to proceed or whether to not proceed, right?
Right.
And when we talk about from a sustainability standpoint of view, more and more manufacturers, OEMs, like the original equipment manufacturers, are coming up with technologies that is more sustainable, like processing with lower energy costs, lower with organic treatments. And that's where my work with Agri-Neo fits into this trend, where we are organic by nature, we are processing aid, we don't add to the product, we whatever we add gets removed in the processing, and we are maintaining that organic labeling that you would want and desire as. And at the same time, the energy requirement to do that processing is low. So that sustainability plays a major role, and that's where I see that is a strong market shift towards that.
Very cool. Yeah, no, thinking about that is such a great use case of AI, from the safety aspect, so we just don't have people getting sick as much, but as well that
Yeah.
sustainability aspect, the less food waste, we're catching it early on, so then maybe that food before it even gets to the part where it's rejected, like if it's rejected early on, it can maybe be
Yeah.
repurposed in a different way. So, and then yeah, the data, like there's so much opportunity for this field, and I have heard what you mentioned earlier that the pharmaceutical industry is compared to the food industry, much faster moving, or like much more. I don't want to say our food safety standards are low, by any means they're not, but the pharmaceutical industry is kind of working on a different field. So I have heard that, but to think that, we can improve in the future, that's a pretty cool thing to look forward to.
And look, both the industries are different, the stakes are also different, and the margins are very different. right? Like, so that's what drives that, what industry is able to adopt to the new technology compared to the other industry. And nothing on that, because you we as humans have that need to make that food affordable so that the masses can afford the food, and there is food for everyone's on everyone's plate, and that's a piece, right? And that's where the amount of capital that a company has would determine the amount that they are able to spend on the new developments, or research, new developments in terms of technology, new developments in terms of research on finding better products and things like that.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point that I've totally forgot about, is that the pharmaceutical margins are so different. But we are
Yeah.
coming to the end of our conversation. So I do want to ask you one more question before I let you go, is just pieces of advice. I always love to ask my guests for students, if you had any piece of advice for a student that's looking to enter in a role that's, let's say, similar to yours, what would you give to them?
And the piece of advice that I would give students currently looking into entering into the project engineering field specifically is having a mindset, and basically living a day in and a day out from uh, first of the safe food safety, hygiene design, that's a sanitary design field, and sustainable engineering. These are the core principles that we engineers learn very early on into our design. If someone is studying design, these are the few things that they will learn as a core designing principles of what they would do and how would they design an equipment that is cleanable easily, that is easy to maintain, and is not an overkill on resources, and is not hard to manufacture or produce. At the same time, the skills that I would recommend that students these days should build on is the project delivery muscle. And I know there a lot of people think about project engineering and project management as the same thing. They are, but at the same time, a project engineer is focused a lot more on the technical aspect, and developing that project management skill right at the school days, getting your PMP in order, taking up those capital management courses, and learning about budgeting, scheduling, is very important to give you that edge. And at the same time, for someone like who's in the mechanical field like myself, but now also wants to enter into the project, I would say go learn your PLCs and controls, learn about CNCs, learn about coding a bit, so to help you understand and interact well with the other functions. Because if you are able to speak the language that they speak, it will make you a successful project engineer, a project manager, or project lead. And an engineer at the end who understands OEE or is invaluable. Like, if they are able to figure out what and how to find waste and fix waste, like, there is just no end, because there is no process in this world that is perfect. There is no process that cannot be improved, because as we evolve, as we grow, there is new and new technology that come into play, and are getting it better. We are getting more efficient. And the little soft skills that I would say the engineers this day who want to enter into this field should have is AutoCAD, which is a really good soft skill to have, along with some 3D modeling, like using SolidWorks, Inventor, things like that, that would help them make those on the fly layout changes, help them make those on the fly design changes without relying on and loading their engineering team with the work. So, for an example, when I'm implementing at customer's facility, I don't rely on my engineering team to do the layouts for me because they are bogged down with other big things that they are working on. So I make those designs quickly, help the customers visualize what they are looking at. And when you're speaking with someone non-technical, pictures speak thousand words, and that's why it is important for you to be able to visually represent your thoughts, and that's where those soft skills come so handy, and they are invaluable, I would say. And this is not something that a lot of people do, myself included, is getting internships in those regulated industries, right? And I wish someone would have told me that, because as an intern, you are indispensable, and you would be thrown onto the deepest end of the project, and you would be able to you would be asked to do the work that most people would not have the time on the bandwidth to do it. For example, if you are in the pharmaceutical industry, you would be working and helping the project coordinator or the project engineer with the documentation work, because they are working on so many other things that those little documentation work is not on their forefront. But as an intern, if you are getting exposed to those documentation, getting into the formality of why do I need to do this? Why do I need to do an RFQ? Why do I need to do a document for moving an equipment from just one location to another? What all gets involved? Who gets assigned with that task, and who needs to sign off on that task? What are the checks? So you get that exposure, and you get to know what all the regulatory aspects does the process go through, so that you have that understanding. And when you are going in for those interviews after your college, you already have an upper hand, because now you know how they function, how the industry functions, and you are able to speak from an experience standpoint of view, and not going in as a fresher where they think like, oh, I have to teach him what the word validation means.
Those are all very good pieces of advice, and I love how you went from very specific to more broad range, so like people can see all the in between. But I am going to leave it there. Thank you so much, Mohammad, for coming on the show, telling me more about what you do. This is a new world for me, a lot of the engineering, so it's really great for me to learn.
I wish you all the best, and I'll keep looking for new and interesting interviews that you keep doing.